Okay. Thank you very much, Pauline. I see we have 20 participants. We are here, we have 20 participants. Do we give them a few more minutes? See if a few more join.
I think we can start since we don't have much time, and we'll admit as we go on.
All right. Thank you very much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on which part of the world you're joining from. We are glad to have you here today. And for this webinar, my name is Clifford Olemo from USIU Africa. And I'll be moderating the discussions today. So this is our fifth webinar since we started conducting them. And we have so far conducted 4 and have plans to conduct 2 more, though we will confirm the dates later on. So this is part of the e-learning. Actually, the program is the e-learning initiative, which is a partnership between the Mastercard Foundation, Arizona State University, and the USIU Africa. And the main goal for this partnership is to just promote the adoption and sustainability of quality online learning, especially in parts of the world where still we find that there are a lot of challenges to access education. So in this project, we have 10 other partner universities that have been participating. And the project has actually, during the implementation project, supported these universities to conduct some research, which is why we are here today, because we have research that was conducted by Ames University and also ASESHI, and it was around promoting student success in digital learning. And therefore, we are here to just hear from the team that conducted the research, and also to learn from the research that they conducted. So at this point, I want to remind participants that you can actually register by typing your name on the chat there, and then also just share some rules for the discussions today. And one is about questions. We are actually requesting that if you have any questions, you'll post them on the chat section there, and also any comments on the comment box there. Then additionally, I'm going to drop here a link, a Padlet link, where you can actually add more comments. And also, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can add there. So the process will be, first we will have and before we go there, I have my colleagues here. As I mentioned, there's a partnership between Mastercard and also Arizona State University and USIU Africa. From USIU Africa, I'm joining from Kenya, actually, Kenya, Nairobi, yeah. And I have my colleague, Kevin Akumu, who has joined. I've seen him around, and many others will be joining, but also my other colleagues from Arizona State University. We have Dr. Pauline, we have Wambua, we have Dr. Hang Duong, we have April Edwards. I've seen Kim around. I've also seen Prince, who is here with us, and I think Minji will also, if she's not yet joined, she'll be joining us. So we have a whole team here that has actually been supporting in the implementation of the great work that has been going on in these 10 partner universities. So we also have 2 panelists, one from Ames, Cameroon, Ames University in Cameroon, and he is actually called Daniel Cheutia, and we will give him a chance to introduce himself. And we also have a panelist called Mr. William, and he is from William Ohene Ano. He is from Aseshi University in Ghana. And we are happy that the panelists are here today to share with us the great knowledge they found in their research, and also for us to learn from it. So I'll start by introducing the panelists, and as you can see on the screen, we will start with Dr. Daniel Devoy-Chota, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Yaoundé, Cameroon, and the academic director at the Center of Excellence in Mathematical Science at AIMS, Cameroon. So his research was about the impact of, was actually about students and lecturers' perceptions of the effectiveness and challenges of face-to-face and online mathematics instructions in large-scale classes. It was a case study of the University of Yaoundé in Cameroon, that is AIMS. So we also have Mr. William Oheneano, who is Assistant Director of the Professor Day Studio for Research Excellence in the Office of the Academic Affairs at Aseshi University. And the research he did was on the impact of online learning on the learning outcomes and performance of the first generation college students in Ghanaian University, a case study of Aseshi. So they will share with us the great work they did. And therefore, at this point, I'd like to give them a chance, each about 10 minutes, to just take us through the research that they did, a presentation of that. And then after that, we will have a session for some questions for them and also some interactions. But keep registering and also dropping your questions on the chat and also on the Padlet. Thank you. So over to you, Dr. Daniel.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I would also like to thank the Mastercard Foundation for this initiative. Could you hear me, please?
Yes, we
yes,
can,
we
Daniel.
can hear you. Just continue.
Okay, so I work on this small grant research project with my colleague Natalie, who is here on this meeting with us. And I cannot see the screen very well as you are projecting. Let me try this way. Okay, it is better now. So this work was on the students and lecturer perceptions of the effectiveness and challenges of face-to-face and online mathematics instruction in large-scale classes. In most of our universities, could you go to the next slide, please? I don't know how you will be, you intend to. Yes, the key point we would like to discuss here, we will start with what inspired the subject and what makes it relevant and significant. In most of our African universities, for example, at the University of Yaoundé, level 1, we used to welcome in mathematics about 1,000 students, in physics, about 1,500, in biology, about 5,000 students. And all these students are taking mathematics courses, and we have very limited number of classes. The highest amphitheater, the number of seats there is 1,000 seats. And it is not an easy task to deliver a mathematics course to 1,000 students, and with some conditions which are not also fulfilled. That is why we are talking about the small classroom versus the huge number of students. And if I take my case, when I was at level 1, I used to leave my home at 5 a.m. to be sure that I secure a seat in a good seat to listening the course, which will take place at 7 a.m. So, and there are also some courses which are ending very late at 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m. because of this insufficient number of classes. That is why we are talking here about late and early classes and safety of the student. And some 3 years ago, one student was killed because she was leaving the campus very late at 9 p.m. after a course. This is a big issue. And in those 1,000 amphitheater, 1,000 seat amphitheater, the sound equipment is not of good quality, and also the blackboard. One day I was having a lecture, I write on the board, and I go myself at the end of the classroom, I could not read what I wrote myself. This was a big shock for me, and I really want to address this point and see how we can solve it. And given that we don't have a lot of classroom, it is very difficult to, and even impossible to cover the required syllabus, and this is not for the advantage of some of the students. And given the big number of the students, following up of the progress of students is a very big issue, very, very big issue. And I think the e-learning could address this type of problem. And we are having a lot of issue again to mark the students' scripts and give them feedback on time. Next slide, please. Okay, given this problem that we have been facing, we had to make a survey that we some lecturers and students used to take in order for us to see what is their perception about the problems. So the first, we didn't put all the research questions here. We just put a few of them. We would like to know the difficulty for students as well for lecturers to access some devices like laptop, tablet, phone, Android phone, and also to get access to high-speed internet. And we would also like to get the perception of lecturers about the in-person classroom, in-person class compared to the online learning. It was really important to know what the student and the lecturers are thinking about this before we move forward. And also here, we like to emphasize on the impact of the inclusion of online learning in the daily practices of students as well for the lecturers. And for the student, we would also like to know what are their fear or expectation of online learning. And these are type of questions we have to ask to students and lecturers. Next slide, please. Yes, for some of our findings, the main obstacle to using online teaching was the poor internet connection. And about 60 to 7% of lecturers teaching in a class of about 500 students do have only one single tutorial session for the whole class regarding this site. One single tutorial session, this is really small compared to what the student really needs in general. And for lecturers who need 3 to 4 hours of tutorial per week, they only have maximum two weekly. And this is about 60 to 7% of the lecturers. And this is really insufficient for most of them. And half of the student respondents did face the issue on unavailability of seats when they want to attend those mathematics classes. And also half of the student respondents reported having difficulties interacting with lecturers, whereas 23% reported having difficulties interacting with peers in traditional face-to-face classes. We know how important is the interaction with the lecturers and the team during the learning process. If the student could not have a difficulty and be able to interact with the lecturer to have some hints, this is a big issue. And the next thing is that 42% of the student respondents felt insecure when the face-to-face class was starting too early in the morning or ending late at the night, and the same proportion found insufficient the number of practice exercises solved with the student. And we really have to take this into consideration because the student as much as you are practicing, you are gaining the skills and so on, and they don't have the chance to have this. The next slide, please. Yeah, and based on this, we get out with these recommendations that mathematical lecturers in Cameroon University should be trained in both online pedagogy and instructional design to build their digital teaching capacities as well as their capacities for online and blended teaching. In our initial proposal, we were for the blended teaching because with this large size of our class, we really need this to have the student online and in person to combine and see what we can get out with. And this should go hand in hand with students training on the uses of the learning management system and online learning etiquette before the start of any online course. Of course, the student need to be well familiar with the learning management system, all the typing, all the software to type mathematical equations before we start any online course. And the recommended approach at the initial stage is to provide students with blended learning experience, combining traditional classroom teaching with online learning tools, with particular attention paid to designing the online section in a way that fosters both learner-student interaction and student peer-to-peer interaction. By improving the interaction between the lecturers and the student and their peers, we are sure we could get out with a better result compared to what we have here. I could not see, okay. And for the next step, we really want to design and deliver a sample course on the model learning management system to make this practical and see exactly what is the impact on this large-scale classroom. From that impact, we could easily tell Mastercard or all the partners, this is what we get from the field. And we propose this next step. And after a delivery, we would like to conduct a survey so we can learn from the findings. Next slide, please. And I think this is where we really want to go. And even this is where our initial project was to go for implementation and go in the classroom, do the in-person when we are back, and we are sure the student will be connected at this time, we move online to keep them in touch, keep this interaction. And if Mastercard could support us to this next step, it would be something fantastic. And one thing that we didn't put here also will be to train mathematical lecturers how to do online courses and design their courses online so that the student could access it easily. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, for that wonderful presentation. Now we will hear from Mr. William Ohene. And as I said, his study was about first-generation scholars, e-learning and academic performance. So, Mr. William, if you could please present for us your findings.
Yes, thank you so much, Clifford. And apologies, I can't have my video on. Our internet connection on campus today is a bit spotty. So, but thanks again to the Mastercard Foundation and to the ASU for all the support as we work on our various e-learning projects. So the title of this project is The Impact of Online Learning on the Learning Outcomes and Performance of First Generation college students in the Ghanaian University. That's the case of Ashesi. And I worked on this with Dr. Estalai and Dr. Sena Boja. Through our background, some of the theories that we use for this project, our problem statement and research questions, and then I'll get into our methodology and results. So next slide, please. All right, so the COVID pandemic, had a lot of effects on different parts or aspects of our life. Right, and the social institutions that were hardest hit by the pandemic, people lost their relatives and family, and people lost their jobs as well, so there was loss of income. And so higher education institutions also had a lot of challenges moving online to manage this disruption. And the challenges were basically can group them into three according to the literature. It's the low-tech know-how of lecturers and students, financial constraints by the universities, and inability to innovate or adapt and be flexible. And according to research or reports by the UNESCO and the European Commission, the school closures increase inequality among students who come from different backgrounds. The next slide, please. So for this research project, we're defining first generation college students as students whose parents, that's either the mother, the father, or any guardian who take care of them, did not complete college, right? And from the research or from literature that we read, an aspect of a student's socio-economic background that really affects their performance is the educational background of their parents, right? And so a parent educational background and the kind of attainments they've made in education, it moderates how these parents typically relate to their students. It affects students' financials, their effect on career-related support that they're getting, academic support from parents, etc. That's according to literature. And these challenges were compounded by the pandemic. For example, FGCS students were twice as worried about paying their school fees as compared to their continuing generation counterparts. According to research as well, it's very likely that FGCS students... Hello? Okay, it's very likely that FGCS students would be in abusive environments, for example, or might face some sort of food or housing insecurity. This can ripple into higher rates of mental health disorders, etc. So the list goes on. And this issue with financial hardships or the difficulty in the increased cost of living and the reduced access to technology are factors that would hamper an online environment for a first generation college student. So please go into the next slide where we talk about the theories that we used. So we used three main theories for this research, right? The first was the connectivism theory, which essentially says that knowledge creation occurs within a network, and it's a flow through a network of human and non-human nodes, right? So it's a relatively new theory, and it suggests that students' learning combines their thoughts, their theories, general information they find online. It describes education or knowledge gain as some sort of 360 experience where students connect with different information buckets from different sources in order to construct their knowledge or make their choices about learning. And we also use the community of inquiry theory. And the community of inquiry theory really puts learning into three main presences: that's social, cognitive, and teaching. So with the social presence, it really describes the student's ability to project themselves socially or emotionally. Example, how they communicate with their instructors or members of their class, and how they learn through those processes. The social presence also is the main element, and it's required before cognitive or teaching presence can occur, right? Cognitive presence is really how students cognitively engage with course content. So are there examples that might trigger them to remember a theory in class properly? What sort of reflections would help students, or what sort of discussions will help students grasp content properly? How can you present knowledge that the students are going to be able to apply in the classroom based on their cognitive levels? And then the teaching presence, of course, is how the lecturer or the professor would organize the course or facilitate the discussion, or how his or her instructional design for the course looks like, etc. And then social capital theory, which is more on connections, right, and how easy it is for students to access certain resources. And it's very evident in research that students who know a lot more college-educated people or have college-educated people in their immediate household are usually more likely to have social capital connected to higher education, and as a result might have a higher edge in their academic careers. Next slide, please. So this slide talks about our problem statement, right? There's a lot of research on first generation college students, but the focus is not really on the African context. And the research done on first gen students in Africa doesn't really point to their academic success in an online learning environment. And in terms of the pandemic, which was a very adverse condition at the time, authors have focused generally on the impact of the pandemic on first generation college students, but not necessarily how it has affected their learning outcomes. And so we believe that that context-specific relevance was helpful or will be helpful for HEIs to put in place measures to meet the needs of their first-gen college students and maximize the benefit of online learning. Next slide, please. So we had 3 main research questions. So the first research question was really to understand the factors that affect the online performance of first-gen college students. So online performance was one thing we're trying to study with this research. The second we're trying to study was the factors that affect the online learning outcomes of first-generation students. And then also the third question was to figure out if the move online led to a significant difference between the learning performance of first-gen college students and then non-first-gen college students. For our research design, we utilized the mixed method approach. So we had a quantitative study conducted, and then we had a qualitative study as well. So the qualitative strand focused more on the experiences of the first-gen college students, where we tried to hear from the students and had some sort of focus group discussions with them. And then the quantitative analysis, we sent out the questionnaire and try to establish some links or connections between online learning, learning outcomes, and learning performance by using a cross-sectional regression analysis. Next slide, please. So for the quantitative study, we sent out a survey to about 300 students. We had 120 of them responding who they had experienced both face-to-face and online learning as a result of the pandemic. And so for the quantitative study, my colleagues led this aspect of the research, and we had certain factors that we had identified to conduct our analysis, right? And so we generated some sub-indices on these factors. So the first was social presence, which was from the concept of inquiry theory, then the cognitive presence and the teacher presence. And each of these sub-indices had different notes under it that describe what the indices. For example, social presence, we use things like sharing, intimacy, respect. Cognitive presence had things like triggering, exploration, resolution, etc. And we conducted a regression analysis on this to understand the difference between the students' CGPAs prior to COVID and then their CGPAs being online for a full semester. Next slide, please. For our qualitative data collection, we conducted 2 rounds of focus group discussions, and we had 17 participants in total. And so we had an interview guide who went through a series of questions to understand their experience studying online, the experiences they had from their online source of study, whether it was home or whether it was in a rented apartment, and their general experience, basically, and their sentiments and feelings to online study. So we conducted a thematic analysis after we were done with this, after we're done with these interviews or these focus group discussions, and then themed the results into word clouds and then try to come up with certain different themes that describe the students' experiences. So the next slide, please. I'll talk a bit more on our data analysis. So with the quantitative data analysis, we use both descriptive and inferential statistics. And so things like standard deviation, we found means, correlations, and multiple regressions, just to establish relationships among the 3 variables that we're studying. And on qualitative, like I shared earlier, we had a thematic analysis, which did reveal a lot of factors that influence learning performance of first-gen students at HESI. Next slide, please. So in terms of our results, we were able to theme for the qualitative study, just to theme the experience of first-gen students into some categories. So we had psychosocial resources, techno-environmental resources, and social environmental hindrances, and then their learning outcomes, right? And so for psychosocial resources, we had pointers like personal resources, where students themselves were very self-determined. The first-gen students, they were very open-minded and willing to learn. They had independence. They were very, very persevering. They were very self-disciplined. Social resources, these first-gen students had a lot of teamwork skills. And as contrary to what literature usually says, they all claim to have very supportive parents and siblings. They were able to rely on friends. And they're also very motivated from past experiences because they had to go through very adverse conditions themselves. And so being adaptable wasn't that difficult for most of them. In terms of the techno-environmental resources, they all mentioned a conducive home environment or a conducive learning environment. Now, even the ones that claimed or mentioned their environment was not too conducive, they did share how parents or guardians were very willing to try and accommodate them learning at home, and then try and create personal spaces for them to study from. In terms of social environmental, they did have some social hindrances like difficulty scheduling group meetings or synchronous meetings because of some home activities they had to get engaged in. And they weren't as active on social media as well. And so sending information might not get to them as quickly. And so and certain resources that are available to support their study, for example, will not be present to them, right? But I think one of the biggest findings that we made through the quantitative study was the fact that, and even through the qualitative study, was the fact that the online learning experience didn't negatively affect the learning performance of these first generation students. And this is not essentially because of, I mean, there are a number of different factors, right, that allowed these students to thrive in online learning environments. And the main ones was, like I shared earlier, their willingness to learn, their teamwork skills, their perseverance, and also some of the resources that Ashesi University provided to them while they were working from home or learning from home. So I guess this is a summary of our presentation, and thank you for listening. If we get into the panel, I'm sure there are questions, we can address them during the panel.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, William, for the presentation, the great presentation, and also to Dr. Daniel. So we have a few questions that we will have before we open the discussion to the participants. And I want to throw my first questions to Dr. Daniel. Your findings show that students struggle to learn mathematics online. And such challenges as typing mathematics equations and getting enough practice exercises were some of the challenges they had. So from your experience, what do you think needs to be done to improve students' experiences learning practical courses online, especially mathematics and other STEM courses?
Thank you for the question. I will go straight to the point. I will say first, given that mathematics in a learning management system like Moodle, you need to type some equations and so on. And even in the scientific world, everywhere in all the journals which are online nowadays, they are using LaTeX. So LaTeX is a software that we use to type mathematical equations, and which is required in almost all scientific journals nowadays. So this is something we have to teach the student from the beginning. LaTeX, how to type mathematics equation in LaTeX. There are free versions everywhere available and accessible by students. The second thing is to familiarize the student with the learning management system. Most may be discouraged if they don't know how to navigate easily on the learning management system. So if at the beginning, we really make this simple and familiar and take time to show them how to make all the different operation on the learning management system, this will also bring us a good result. And from the lecturer side, they should put as much practical example as possible in the learning management system with all the details, so that when a student is stuck in one question, he can easily move to the second one. And by practicing on many examples, he or she could easily get the main point of that lecture. And in Moodle that we are taking for our example here, we can easily incorporate Maxima, which is a computer algebra system, and which is going to do the computation behind Moodle, so that when you give a matrix to a student, you say compute the determinant. When the student is computing the determinant, the learning Moodle could easily return the answer, and the student will see if his or her answer was good or not. So these are things we really have to do in such situation. We have to encourage group work. A teamwork at EMS, for example, we are giving assignments to students and really force them to work in group, because this is what is going to develop. There is no research lab where people are working alone. people in group are producing better results than those working alone. All the field medals, the Nobel Prize are working in team. And we have to encourage our students from the beginning to have this team spirit, not being very strong alone, but being strong as a team. And we need to find a kind of motivation in terms of mark for students who are working, who are doing as many practical exercises on the LMS as possible, so that it is a kind of reward to encourage them. You know, in most of the cases, students like marks, and if you find a way to encourage them this way, there will be more motivation. And this is what I could say for this first question. Maybe in case Natalie has some additional comment she could give here. Natalie, any additional point?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Maybe something just very little. Daniel said almost all we were having in mind. We can also consider multiplying the number of tutorial online sessions, like because of the limited classes, there were very few tutorials. So now lecturers can have more sessions online where they can have one-on-one interactions with the students, and this will definitely improve their experiences. Another thing we saw was that since students are having challenges with typing LaTeX, there are some tools that can allow them to just write as if they're writing on their paper, and then it generates the LaTeX code for them. So we are going to explore them and see how we can integrate it to the LMS so that it can help those who are having challenges with the typing of LaTeX. One of the tools, maybe I'll just paste the link online, but this is really something that we have not yet done, and we are working on that. So students can just write with their mouse, and then it generates the LaTeX, and it will give them definitely a better experience with mathematics lectures. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. And in just 2 minutes, my other question, you can answer this within 2 minutes. From your study, some of the challenges that students face include, Can you hear me? Daniel?
Yes,
Dr.
I can
Daniel?
hear you. I can hear you, please.
So from your study, some of the challenges that students face while learning online include adaptation to the online course platform, which you've talked about how we can actually ensure from the start that they're familiar with it. We have challenges like poor internet connection, power outages, issues to do with how they can do their group work and online exams, among other challenges. So what should institutions do to ensure students succeed in online learning, given the limited resources that we know these institutions have? For instance, we are talking about financial and infrastructure. They are limited, but what can they do to ensure that students who are learning online are able to succeed in their studies?
Okay, you talk about power outage. I will say here that given the electricity issue we have in Africa, in Cameroon also, as the LMS we would like to use is accessible through Android phone, one option could be for students to use power bank. If possible, this could improve the situation. And also at AIMS, as we really encourage group work, we are always trying to, we are really pushing the student to work in team generally to improve their results. So at the level of the institution, this is something which could help in the teamwork. And also for online exam may not work properly with power outage, and here this is why we really recommend the hybrid system. And for the institution giving the financial problems, we really encourage to avoid early or late class classroom, to equip lecturers with necessary material to design good online courses and which are accessible by all the students. And we know that we know that students are using most of the time WhatsApp and so on. They are buying bundles to get access to those social media platforms. So if we, as I said earlier, if we really design our online courses properly, which is so that it could be accessible, highly motivating, the student could find the exact solution they are having, they will want to find, every time they have problem, they go on the online management system, they could find a solution. We are sure they are going to proceed and buy bundle to get access to those materials. So at this point, it is a matter of motivation, prepare good accessible lectures and notes, and be interacting as much as possible with the student. Maybe Natalie still have something to add here. Natalie?
Yes, sorry, I will still pull people to the tech side because I am a tech person. I was just thinking that since regarding the internet issue, with the poor internet issue, we can have an intranet. Like if you have a good funding and we build an intranet and we have a hotspot, it will cover a certain range. When students are having internet connectivity issue, they can just move to a range where they can access the signal, and then they can have access to all the resources without being connected to the internet. So this is something that we can also consider doing to make sure that even those who cannot afford the bundles can still access all the resources without having to access the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Now to Mr. William about the first generation college students. From your study, we see that most first generation college students face unique challenges. Actually, we know that they face challenges, as you've just talked about it, that negatively affect the academic outcomes. However, when we look at the findings, they show that there's no significant difference in the academic performance of the first generation college students and non-first generation college students when their pre and post-pandemic cumulative grade point averages were compared. So why do you think your findings were contrary to most research findings on the topic? And was there anything unique about the students you sampled that maybe you could mention?
All right, Clifford. Thanks a lot for the question. So yes, there was no significant difference between the performance of first-gen college students and non-first-gen college students. And this can largely be attributed to some of the traits that these students have, right? Like I shared in my presentation, the students were very goal-oriented. They were very persistent, willing to learn from their mistakes, willing to quickly adapt. But it doesn't take away the fact that online learning comes with its own challenges. There are internet connectivity challenges. There are situations, for example, there were students who, because of their situation at home as not just first-gen students, but people from very poor socioeconomic backgrounds, once they come to college, the rooms in which they stay in at home, is rented out to somebody else to live in, right? And so going back home very abruptly is not helpful for the family, because then the space you're living in has been rented, and so essentially there's no space for you to study in. And so there were these challenges that students had, that no matter how resilient or zealous you are, it will be difficult for you to adapt, right? But I think with the students that we serve, I think your question asked what was unique about the students we sampled, right? The students we sampled had access to resources that made online learning easier for them. So for example, students who had this challenge of accommodation were rented apartments to stay in, or were given rented houses to stay in, right? While we went through this online learning phase during COVID, students had access to a 24/7 hotline team that was available to support them with their online learning tools, take them through some demos if they need these demos, just to understand how to use the tools. There was a lot of peer support available. We had inactivity reports where students who were not, because there are some students who might have challenges but might not be able to openly share these challenges, right, because of some reasons. And so these inactivity reports would catch some of these students, and the first gen ones who are in there, or general students who are in there, who have these unique challenges, will be given support. So I think it was a combination of two things. The students had the independence. They were very, very supportive from their homes. Their families seemed quite supportive of them, at least most of the ones that we surveyed. And they were very persevering. They had this aspirational tendency to the way they were approaching their learning. And aside all these personal traits or environmental traits that they had, the university as well was providing support to them. Students, for example, were not on campus, and so internet fees, for example, was being apportioned to students and lecturers to help subsidize how much internet they use at home for online studies. So I think that these were some of the reasons why I guess we saw no significant difference, and also in terms of even the personal skills I mentioned, in terms of teamwork and their parental support, even though all their parents hadn't gone to university, we're generally very communal people, right? And so even though they couldn't give their awards the academic support or career guidance that they needed, they were able to provide the support in other forms, like I shared, other forms such as just trying to understand the situations that the students are in, trying to create personal spaces for students to work in, trying to, of course, limit as much as possible the amount of home chores they need to do, and things like that. So I think it was a mixture of these two things: their personal traits and the support that they got from the university.
All right, thank you. And could you please talk about what support Aseshi University is providing to ensure that all students succeed, irrespective of whether they are first-generation college students or non-first-generation college students, and what lessons can other institutions borrow from the best practices from Aseshi University, maybe in just 2 minutes?
Okay, sure. So I think a main reason why first-gen students might have low academic performance is also because of, the limited social capital they have to draw from when they're interacting with other students in a university setting, right? Now, in terms of support that Ashesi University provides, during the online learning period, like I shared, we had a lot of support systems. So students had access to faculty office hours still, and these were being held virtually just to provide guidance to students. There were counseling and coaching services available. Our career services team was working fully online to provide support to students and give them that guidance, irrespective of whether they are first gen or not, right? And the design of all these programs, even the peer support services, the inactivity reporting, so every single student was being tracked. And so students who are not attending classes for a couple of days would be tracked and reported on this sheet. And then so the hotline team would be able to approach these students and then find out what their challenges are, right? And the design was such that it was available to everybody, and it was cut across for others as well. So everybody was being monitored on these systems. And so FGCS students were caught in this as well. And so they also were able to receive some of the support systems that were available just by virtue of design, right? And in terms of lessons that other institutions can borrow, I think it's important to develop policies and build capacity that allows you to provide that sort of universal design support to students, right? These FGCS students, for example, we mentioned traits like self-determination, self-reliance, self-confidence. It's important to enhance some of these traits that these students have, right? Because that way, then these are skills, these are leverages that they have, and so the more you advance them or enhance them, the better they are at growing these skills. But in terms of support systems, like I shared, there were a variety of different things, and most of these things are still available now. The 24/7 hotline team is still available. The career services team, office hours, counseling and coaching, inactivity reporting, we're not doing as much of right now because we're in person. But that inactivity report, that weekly inactivity report to the academic affairs team was very helpful in just tracking students that were falling off the grade and just trying to bring them back in.
All right. Thank you very much. So,
please click for, if I may.
yes.
Yes, there is a question in the chat about having disabled students.
Yes.
In mathematics, we are having right now we have one student in level 2 who cannot read. He has an eyes issue. So what we usually do during the exam, we have to take the exam script, go nearby him, read for him to hear and be able to respond. And what he usually do with the help of his classmates is to ask them to read the course so that he will listening and try to understand what was done in the class. So, and for this student, what we really need is just either a laptop or a tablet where we can put all the courses, and with some applications, he will be able to listening the courses, the PDF. There are ways to for PDF to for us to read the PDF in a laptop or a tablet, and this is going to help a lot this student. This is why this online courses is going to be very important for such students. And also in the learning management system, we have the chat. In the chat, the student will share their problems, share the solution, share the experience, and this is going to be more beneficial for all of them instead of only a group of students sitting down and sharing those problems, and maybe sometimes they don't have a solution. And when they don't have a solution, they generally don't know whom to go. Whereas with the online system, they have there is an hotline where they could get access to a tutor of the course, and the tutor will take time to explain to them why they were stuck at some point, what was the difficulty, and by doing so, the students are going to learn very quickly and more efficiently. I just wanted to throw light on this question before you proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, and we will continue with now have a few more questions from the participants as we just near closing the discussion in the next few minutes. So you can actually either raise your hand and unmute to post your question, but we've also shared a link on the chat. We have a link to the Padlet where you can also post some questions for the panelists. So any other questions from the participants to our panelists? You can just unmute and please post your question.
Daniel, Clifford, we had a question or a comment from Jamie, and they said that I would like to make a comment and know the presenter's opinion about it. Imagine that current face-to-face courses should take advantage of e-learning tools as an opportunity to increase digital education of professors and students. Perhaps hybrid education models will serve as support to encourage students to experience self-learning in synchronous moments. Perhaps our courses by their very design should encourage students to be proactive and committed to their self-learning processes using as many e-learning tools as possible. I think that was more of a comment, but Jamie, you can feel free to unmute, clarify, or add to the comment, and maybe you can get a response if any of our panelists has a comment or opinion on the same.
Maybe Pauline, just to add to that comment, this is one of the reasons why at the end we really recommend the hybrid system for the moment, because we cannot quickly move from the face-to-face, the in-person to the online, given that we really need both systems so that the student will be meeting the lecturers in person and being able to address their issues online, discuss, and so on. This is something we are really encouraging and would like to go through in the next step.
Okay, I see we don't have any more questions from the attendees or the participants. So I want to thank you so much for attending this webinar today. And we would love your feedback. So we will share a form where you can fill. We just have 3 questions on a Google form. You rate your experience about today's webinar and what you liked most, and also what can be improved in the next webinars. As we were beginning, we told you there are 2 more webinars. We are just here to confirm their schedule, but then we would like to make them even better. So we also have contact information for the panelists and the e-learning initiative. So my colleague Pauline and also the entire team, we will share with you the dates for the next webinars when they happen. But then we have the themes, which I think we can just show you what they will be about before we finish. So we have the next one will be about digital education with special focus on the 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report. And the last one will be about youth perspectives and experiences on online learning. So with that, we thank you very much for coming for this meeting, and those who still have the day, enjoy your day. Those who are going home to rest, yeah, have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
very much.
Bye.
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 Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll just connect briefly the e-learning team. Just a minute. Yeah, okay, yes. So let me stop the recording.